So here we are for episode 7 of Not Another Mental Health Podcast. And we are joined, as usual, by Becky and Niall. But more importantly, from Sam. Sam, I'm going to ask, which I should have asked before we started, really. What's the right way to pronounce your surname? I was going to say Moinet. Is that?
Yeah, you got it right first time.
Yes, nailed it. That is
Nailed it, mate.
amazing. So welcome along. Thanks for joining us, Sam.
Thanks so much. I'm buzzing to be here.
Excellent stuff. Um, Now there's loads and loads that I've got that I want to ask. But first off, before we get into that, tell us a little bit about you and your background and how we've come to this point of having this conversation today.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Sam. I'm the founder of Student Breakthrough and the Educators Coaching Academy. And in essence, what we do is transform mental health support in schools. But my journey started all the way back before then. Do you want me to go all the way back?
Yeah, let's go all the way.
Okay. So I remember being in the playground at school, and I remember being bullied and picked on. But I just remember not feeling sure of myself at school.
Mhm.
Like super anxious, didn't fit in. I wore Harry Potter glasses, I had combed over hair, like the clunkiest shoes. And I just never felt like I found my tribe or my group. I'm the oldest of two boys, so got there's three of us, three brothers. And my younger brothers were just the popular kids in their year, like the coolest kids in their year. And I'm the oldest, and I was just the most like awkward in some ways. And it didn't help that my dad is like the super macho guy who was Royal Marine, fought in the Falklands, covered in tattoos, got a beard, all this stuff. And I remember looking at him being like, he's done all this great stuff that's manly, and I'm not that. I'm the kid in Harry Potter glasses and clunky shoes. And I remember when I was a really young lad making the decision to join the British Army as this sort of was going to save me from this life of inadequacy.
Yeah.
Um, and also, I just felt like I wanted to do something to make him proud of me. You know, like all of our beliefs around the world are formed between the ages of 0 and 8. And obviously, at that point, I took on the belief that joining the military was the only way I was going to get my dad's approval, which is a load of BS, by the way, because he never said that. He never sat me down and on his knee and said, "You got to join the army, or I'm not going to love you."
That's what you just told yourself.
But you take on and we all take on those beliefs from parents, from teachers, from significant people in our lives, and it shapes our whole journey, which is why we end up in therapy and coaching and counseling a lot of the time to unpack that stuff.
Yeah.
So I made that decision. All I wanted to do was be a soldier. And when was I? 21. I just finished uni. And if you're listening, imagine achieving your dream, your childhood dream. It might have been to go to Mars, to, I don't know, play football for England, wherever it was. I achieved my dream in 2012 when I got a letter through the post from the Royal Anglian Regiment that said, Sam, we'd love to sponsor you through military, through officer training, like welcome along, all this stuff. And I remember running up to my dad at 21 and we had this big embrace. You know, when you hug someone and you like properly hug them, they feel their heartbeat, they feel the squeeze. And I cried. And I really felt in that moment that my dad was proud of me and that he loved me. And I guess I was somebody. And then a few weeks later, I got a curveball and I never experienced any real failure up to this point. But I got a letter through the post a few weeks later, same kind of army letter, which was like A4 letter with a red waxy stamp on it. I always remember that. And I went down to the front door, picked up this letter and cut through the red wax. And in that moment, everything changed for me. And the first line said, Sam, unfortunately, due to the fact you've been diagnosed with Crohn's disease, you can no longer become a soldier and join the armed forces.
Really?
Yeah, you gotta be perfect.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and my condition luckily is fairly mild. I've had some flare-ups, had some time in hospital, and I take medication, but it never stopped me until that point, and then it did. And I remember like, collapsing onto the floor at the front room of the house and literally hugging my legs into my chest and sobbing uncontrollably. And I just couldn't stop crying. I got my coffee mug, smashed it against the wall. And everyone's pain is relative. And up to that point, like that was the most painful thing I'd experienced. And through drinking and smoking lots of Marlboro Reds and walking around, I just became even more lost and lost. And I ended up working at M&S coffee shop. Did get voted best barista by the old ladies at the M&S coffee shop. So
Nice, nice.
there was some benefits to this, though they weren't 21 at the time, were my age. And I was serving coffee, and I was like, "There's got to be more to life than this." You know, I'd had this big dream of being a soldier and being the man, and then here I am serving toasties and tea cakes to old ladies. I just felt like there's got to be more than this. So I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I became a teacher. And you're probably thinking, well, how did that happen? My mum was a primary school teacher. And they kind of pushed me a little bit. They're like, go into teaching, or use some life skills. It'll, give you some qualification you can take around the world and all that good stuff. That's what I did. I became a secondary school history teacher in a state school.
Oh my word.
But the victimhood, and I use the word victim because I was such a victim. I'd not taken ownership for my life. And the victimhood, the negative self-talk, the dark cloud just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I always remember, I imagined if like someone from the army came knocking on my classroom door, I'd have bolted out that room and gone with them because it was still what I thought I wanted to do. But this got to the point where I really struggled to sleep, and it was the sleep that started to affect my teaching. And when I was struggling to sleep, I then became a chronic insomniac. So I was, for like a year, I got between an hour and maybe 3 hours a night, and then I'm going to try and teach 150 kids. So then not sleeping, then made me feel more anxious. Then I got more anxious about not sleeping, and then anxious about being anxious. And there was a point where I couldn't get out of bed to go and teach. Like my mental health had got so low. And I didn't know by the way, I didn't know how to deal with it. I was just dealing with it like any guy, like drinking, distracting myself, and partying, basically. And like shock horror, it didn't get better. But the pivotal moment was I was teaching a room full of 16-year-olds, and I was feeling really low this day. But again, you have to put on the brave face. It's like a mask, right? You're great at wearing masks because we're all good at wearing masks, aren't we? That's why this podcast is great, because you're taking down the mask.
Yep.
But I was wearing the mask of happy, successful, whatever it was. But inside, I was an absolute wreck. Inside, it was like a tornado spinning around. But on the outside, it was like glorious sunshine. And a girl at the front, her name was Susie, unbelievable student, really caring student. She looked me dead in the eye, almost like she knew. She said, "Sarah, you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine." And the acronym I use for fine is feelings inside not expressed.
Oh, I've not heard that before. I like that.
Yeah, you can use that one, Becky.
She will.
Yeah.
He's
It's not
writing it
mine.
down.
I heard it. But it's a great acronym, because
Yeah.
especially in the UK, we're so great at saying I'm not bad, I'm fine, and people gloss over that. And it's like, well, what does that actually mean? Do you know what I mean? What does that actually mean to you, and what does fine look like to you? Do you know what I mean? Like, that's a great question. Anyway, she asked me this, and I responded with fine. I have my whiteboard pen in one hand, and I start panicking because I realize I'm about to cry. So I grab my pen and I turn away from the board or from the class. And I remember like faking writing on the board because I was like, I cannot cry in front of this group of 16-year-olds. And I, saw myself out, pulled myself together, delivered the lesson. But that was the pinnacle moment where I realized I had to get some sort of help or support.
Yeah.
Because when you're at the bottom of the mountain, there's sometimes only one way up. And I was broken. I was really low. Well, the lowest I've gone. But remember, everyone's pain is relative. It's not a competition. Who's got the worst mental health award? It's not about that. It's whatever your pain is to you. And I fell into coaching. I got some support through coaching, and it was all by chance. A guy, my best friend said, "Hey, speak to this guy. He's a coach." I thought coach was for rugby and football and cricket. But I remember distinctly as a kid, we were told to man up, pull your socks up, don't show emotion. Emotion is for girls. Boys don't get sad. Any sign of weakness is something to be picked on and punished. So for a guy to sit down, and it was on the phone, by the way, it wasn't even face to face or on Zoom. This was like 2015, so I don't think Zoom was even a thing. It was the 23rd of April, 2015. And he did three things. He listened to me. He asked me some powerful questions, and he gave me silence. And the biggest thing I learned from this experience was express, don't suppress, which is the message I share with students and teachers in the work I do now. Express, don't suppress. And I remember like the dark storm cloud almost like lifting, and it was bright for the first time. And I physically had this experience. I left the call after sobbing like a baby, was walking around Milton Keynes, my hometown where I'm from, and the whole park was vibrant. It was like taking your sunglasses off on holiday. I always use that because you can find it's like woof. It's like an HD, full color. And for a while it had been toned down. It was in maybe not black or white, but the picture was a bit distorted.
Yeah.
And then went back into school and became a much better teacher. And I remember going into school and being like, wow, I love this job. This is what I was meant to do. Not going like some fight for my country, BS belief that I learned from my dad. It was education's my thing.
Yeah.
There's some more. I don't know if you want us to pause there or do you want to keep? I can
That
keep going.
is no. Well, for me, Becky's got loads of questions. There's something that you just said a second ago, actually, that I remember having a conversation with someone last year about, and that is this constant belief that when people ask, "How are you feeling?" or they say, "How are you?" We've got to say, "Yeah, I'm good," or "Yeah, I'm okay." But what's wrong with saying, "Do you know what? I'm just normal. I'm just having a normal day. I'm not good. I'm not bad, but I'm just in the middle. And there is that almost that I don't know, expectance that you've got to say I'm one way or the other. I can't just be kind of going through. And I think, I like what you said about fine. I think that is immense. And the mask piece is just, I mean, how easy is it to slip on a mask, right? That's the biggest issue, with all of this, that society believes that you should be a certain way or you should show up in a certain way. And actually, like with the example that you gave there with the student who could recognize and could see, what's the alternative to you to stand and turn around in front of a class of 16-year-olds and say, actually, no, I'm not, you know? But heaven forbid, what actually, what if you did say that? And I'm not saying, in that example, but if we were in a society where actually sharing how you're feeling was okay, there wasn't that pressure, then we should be able to turn around and say, do you know what, actually, I'm not. No, you know. But what would have happened for you on that day, I suppose, if you'd have approached it that way, or how do you perceive that it would have been handled?
We had a chat about that at an event that I hosted about vulnerability and building relationships with students. And if I went back into the classroom now, I think I'd start the very first meeting when you meet students, which is very important. How you show up on that first lesson with them sets the tone for the whole year. And I'll probably share my story now. What I just shared with you guys. But as a 24-year-old, 23-year-old, 20, well, was I 22? 22, I wouldn't have done that.
No.
I also think you've got to have the right class. You've got to have the class that's responsible. Or maybe, the boisterous year 8s on a Friday period 5, you're going to say, hey guys, I'm not feeling great. Because they probably dig at you for that. And you've got to have the right, but I'd let them in a bit more than I used to, for sure.
Yes.
It shows human connection, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
do you think it's a British thing? Because I know exactly what you're both saying there. So say, and you know, Niall, Dave, you know, if I'm not feeling great, to be honest, I tell people. But there are, as you say, Sam, there are only certain people you can tell. Because I know it seems like a very British thing that if I turned up on a call with somebody, it was like, oh, how are you doing? I went, not that great, actually. It would almost make things a little bit uncomfortable. Because as you say, as a society rule, you can't show that level of vulnerability unless you already have a relationship built up with that person.
Yeah, can I share on that?
Yeah, of course, go for
Yeah.
it.
I was in Subway, and I make a point of asking people's names. It's so great. Like when people are in the service industry and you ask them, "Hey, what's your name?" They're like, and then you ask them how they are. It's a double whammy.
Yeah.
I'm like, "Hey, what's your name?" She's like, "My name's Liz." "How are you today, Liz?" She's like, "Yeah, I'm not bad." And I then asked her, "No, how actually are you today?"
Mm.
She said, "I'm fucking shit." And I was like,
Um,
"Wow." And I said, what's been causing that? And then she unraveled all the stuff about she was unsatisfied in her job, she was having difficulties at home. And if I'm being totally honest, and I'm a coach and I work in mental health, like her response took me back.
Yeah.
She was like not messing around. Like she told me dead straight.
mm,
And we then had a conversation afterwards. And I do think it was powerful for her because she got recognized as a human being in that moment, not just a human doing,
yeah,
making my meatball Mariana.
yeah. Because I also think it takes a lot of guts to actually stand up and show your vulnerability. So I'm a big fan of, is it Brené Brown that talks about vulnerability and things? And I know I've mentioned it to a few people about that. Sticking your head above the parapet, as I always call it, for that first time to show your vulnerability, to share you've had something wrong, to do that, say, actually, you know what? No, I'm shit. It takes a lot of guts to do that because depending on your audience, you may just get either ignored, shut down, or avoided for the rest of your life, essentially. It's a funny one. There's a fine line, isn't there, between who you can and can't express those feelings to, I think.
So now, weirdly enough, so those who don't know, so a common trait in autism is something called alexithymia, and that's a trait that I have. And alexithymia is the inability to really detect what you're feeling. So there'll be a feeling there, but I can't put a name to it. I don't know what it is. It's just there. And so, whereas I was growing up, I used to always get asked your normal chit chat, which also, as anyone knows, I just did not understand the chit chat. I often ignored it and then would get lambasted for it, to be honest. But they would go, "Oh no, how are you?" And I'll go, "I don't know." And then they'd go, are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, just I don't know." And they go, "Well, if you ever need someone, I'm here." I'm like, what I don't understand why you do it, because that perception of saying I don't know was almost like I was hiding something, and I was a bit like,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
I just don't know. That's a trait that I have. But weirdly enough, like what you're saying here, I don't want to make it about kind of autism. I've already had my episode, but weirdly enough, one of the things I've had to learn with my autism specialist was the ability to, even though it doesn't make sense to me, to get on with social norm and go, and when someone talks to you, go, "How are you?" and just respond. He doesn't necessarily say you have to say I'm good, but what used to happen, he'd go, "How are you, Niall?" And I'll go, "I don't know." And then he'd go, "Yeah." He'd kind of be like, if you, it was like, "I get it. I know you don't like it," but he's like, "But if you want to go for normal conversation and instigate something, you've got to respond in some way." So it's weird as well that I've actually had to have that trained into me. But
Yeah.
just saying I don't know caused chaos.
Yeah.
Wow. So, Sam, do you think in that example with the lady from Subway? Now, I'm gonna make a um a horrendous assumption, but guess that that lady was under 30-ish.
No.
Ah, okay. Even more interesting then, because what I was going to ask was, do you believe that if it was a younger person, there is that generational shift? But I'm now more intrigued if
Well,
she's if
I was going to share on that because you got to flirt with vulnerability on social media as well when you run a business. Because let's be honest, it's not all unicorns and rainbows. It's tough, and I do the occasional post that is like, hey, I'm not good at the moment, or I screwed up, or this is not what's good, this is what's great. My mum and dad, like, who've got me on social media, they're like, whoop, whoop, whoop. You can't show that. Don't share that. I'm like, why not? And they're like, well, it's weakness. And people don't like buy weakness. People buy strength. And, you're meant to be this running the business and leader and whatever. And I said, yeah, I understand that. But at the same time, we're all human beings. And not everyone is firing on 100% all the time. But it was really interesting for them. They literally think I shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
I should never post about that. When I know for a lot of times I have posted like that. Again, not all the time. And also you don't want to make it a pity party, right? Like it's but it's important to let people in. The times I have done that, a lot of people have been like, wow, that really resonates. I really connect with that. Thank you. Because I think Becky mentioned the vulnerability is one word. I'd use the other word, courage.
Yeah.
Word. And it's courageous when you share in that way. It's courageous when you talk. It's courageous when you open up, because it can inspire other people.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
And it's go on, sorry, Becky.
No, you go first. You go first.
I was just going to say that I think it's becoming not more mainstream, but certainly more recognized that actually being open and honest about how you are feeling is actually a strength rather than a weakness, and being able to not just recognize it, but portray that, let people know, because I think that the big thing when I first started talking about my mental health wasn't necessarily about, oh, I just want to talk about my mental health. It was more about, I've hidden this for over 20 years. I don't want someone else to be doing the same thing. So if actually I can say how I feel and someone else can go, oh my word, I feel like that. Perhaps I should do something about it. That's the whole point. It's not like you say, Sam, it's not a pity party. It's not every day I'm going to be like, here are my woes, because actually there's days that are good and then there are days that aren't so great. But if people are aware of that, then surely that's a good thing.
Normalizing it a bit more, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what it is. Sam, I was going to ask, so I know you said obviously you were in that teaching position when you started to feel like that. Did you find within the teaching system that there wasn't that internal support when you started to feel like that? Is that why you went external, or was it just by chance that you ended up sort of going down the external coaching route?
Well, there wasn't, no, I mean, a bit of both really. There wasn't that support. And even my line manager wouldn't get it, I don't think. And he's a top, he's still a great friend, top bloke. He would have been able to, he would have listened to me for sure and try to understand, but he wouldn't have had the skills to help me in any way. But at the same time, I didn't want to go internal because it was a sign of weakness. Like perceived, isn't it? Like it's perceived weakness. And I was the new guy. And to show that I was struggling just didn't even compute. I was like, I've got to hide this, like Dave just mentioned, right? You've got to hide. And when you wear the mask, over time, the mask becomes a bit of an identity. And the identity ends up, the mask, you might be an internal mask that you're wearing, if that makes sense. Like it's an internal feeling that you're hiding. And then obviously, as we all know, over time, when you hide that, it's like shaking up the Coke bottle. And then one day it goes bang and you cry in front of you cry in front of a group of kids.
So was it from your coaching experience and when you got the support you needed, was that when you were able to then see that gap and start sharing your feelings and identify that within that school environment, that education environment, there wasn't that support available?
Yeah, that was the crazy thing, because it all starts with pain, doesn't it? A lot of the time.
It does,
So that's probably the podcast started with pain, didn't it? So
there are some days that it's still painful, Sam, to be fair, but you're absolutely right.
What, hang out with these two or the podcast?
Well, don't answer that.
So I went back into school and became a much better teacher, but started to get into what helped me with my anxiety was coaching, acceptance and commitment therapy, and mindfulness. So I started to really benefit myself personally. And I started to run these workshops for kids. It was called the Acceptance Academy. It was all about acceptance and commitment therapy, which is basically like not pushing away the thought. It's accepting it's there, which means you're not fighting it, if that makes sense. It's, you know, it's giving it space. And then couple that with mindfulness. It's a nice approach when you're feeling stressed or anxious. So I was running sessions like this. I started to then think, you know, it was one time my head was about to hit the pillow. When I was a kid, my dad was like, "You're going to have an idea one day. It's going to change the world." I was like, "Yeah, I want the idea now." He's like,
yeah.
"It'll come. It'll come naturally, right?" And the idea that I had that night before my head hit the pillow was, I can do more than just teach history. I can help kids and support them with their mental health. It's had such a great impact on me just talking. Sure, I can do that for kids. So I then looked at acceptance and commitment therapy, counseling, and it came down on coaching. And I completed a 6-month coaching course in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And I started practicing with the students at school. And there was the first practice client I had was a girl who I was teaching again, imagine the classroom, teaching a lesson, you get a knock at the door, it's the head teacher. And I open the door and I look down and there's this 13-year-old girl, leather jacket, and she's like, "G'day, sir." Looks like self-assured. She's just flown from Melbourne to Milton Keynes. God bless her soul. So she's flown, she's, you know, she's in the big city of Milton Keynes. She's probably hadn't seen a roundabout before, I don't know.
I was going to say plenty of roundabouts.
Or the concrete cows. But she turns up to the classroom, and over time, I see her slowly struggling. It gets to the point we're running a reading group for my form, and she's got a book up to her face, and she's crying behind the book. So I go to next to her, I say, "Hey, are you okay?" Obviously not. Like, we talked, and I said, "I'm doing this coaching thing. Are you interested?" So I started to coach her with her mum's permission and my line manager's permission. And I saw this transformation in this girl where she was being listened to, but she was also understanding herself on a deeper level. And everything she did, whether it was getting a laptop to catch up faster, starting a boxing class, reconnecting with old friends, speaking to teachers to help her catch up faster. This might sound like nothing to us as adults, but for a student, it's huge. And it all came from her, which then teaches her that, I can actually empower myself to make decisions. I don't need an adult to save me, or no one's going to save me. I can save myself. So that was a really cool moment. And then I made the decision to leave teaching. I'd sold one coaching package for 40 quid. And I was 27, and I thought, now's the time. So I made a business called Student Breakthrough, excuse me, and a program called the 3 Bs, which is Boost, Believe, and Breakthrough. And then left the classroom in 2018. Wow. And all those same fears came back, of anxiousness, of insomnia. And actually, to an extent, it's always been there on my business journey. Every time you level up, that inner critic, that part X, the greater risk that you take, the louder that voice gets. So it's always going to be there. And yeah, I started coaching kids. Struggled to make ends meet. My mentor at the time was American. She's like, "Go and get a job." And my ego was like, "Oh, I've just left the classroom. 3 months later, I'm dragging my heels back into school." It was a massive blessing. I was teaching the First World War. Head teacher knocks on my door. He says, "Hey, you're doing this coaching thing, right?" I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "We'd love for you to work with our pupil premium, so low income students, and looked after children." So I started coaching them, then started running workshops for kids, assemblies, teacher events, parent events, just spreading really like the coaching ethos, which is to be a heart with ears and to empower people to make their own decisions. And yeah, it's led me to help thousands of kids, train loads of teachers, and recently I've launched another business called the Educators Coaching Academy, which trains teachers as coaches in that program. So it's a little ripple effect, you know, from Cuba to Dubai.
I was just about to say, you say a little ripple effect, but we're not just talking about UK here, are we, Sam? And you've just started to touch on it there.
Yeah, I mean, the cultural differences are massive, and the community we're growing is really cool. Like, you know, training a teacher in Havana, Cuba, and I've been to Cuba, and it's a very, very poor place, you know, in parts, and to help this teacher, I mean, she speaks huge about the community. Like being in our communities helps her help her with her ADHD, helps her with her self-confidence. So then she's able to then better show up for her kids. And then you've got, teachers in international schools in China where the whole course is translated into Mandarin, which is a really cool moment. Again, the cultural difference is there, and it's getting there. But for me, it's just growing this network of coaches, of teachers that want to offer something different. Because it's different to counseling and therapy, where you have to obviously, go and study for many years. And if you're a therapist, become a medical doctor, basically.
Yeah.
I'm not saying coaches, that's the downside of coaching. Anyone can call themselves a coach. So as long as you're like trained to a great standard, like an ICF level program, you've got amazing skills to help people in the present moment. And that's why it's so accessible to people, because they get it and they can implement it straight away. And it makes such a difference to so many.
And I think one thing that that was really good when we spoke a few weeks ago, Sam, was obviously, how this started in terms of being able to coach and support, pupils, and then, coaching teachers to be able to coach pupils, has actually had a really positive effect on the teachers' mental health and well-being as well, hasn't it?
Yeah, I kind of skipped over that bit. I mean, when the business is run this way, which I love this advice from, I was going to say Russell Brand, then it's Russell Brand, it's Richard Branson.
That would be interesting advice there.
Well, yeah. He wrote a book called Say Yes. And it's basically all about saying yes to opportunities, especially in the first years of entrepreneurship. Just keep saying yes, boom, 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 yes, yes, yes. Yeah, you might be chasing the money, but at the same time, it opens up so many doors. So a school in North London said, "Can you train our staff?" It's like, yeah, of course I can train your staff. I was actually struggling at this point. I had a big breakup. I'd moved to London, was partying loads. I was, again, distracting myself in the wrong way. So I share that just, again, to be vulnerable and honest.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't in the best place. And I made this like coaching program for the teachers. I was delivering it. And I started to see these results. And all I wanted was for the teachers to learn how to coach students. But the teachers on the program were then reflecting on themselves, coaching themselves, being coached. And I started to see the actual benefit for the staff was mega. And that's how you get a cultural change, where the staff are trained and they understand themselves on a deeper level. They then had the skills and the tools to support the students. And that's really where the whole ECA, Educators Coaching Academy, came from, was that moment of, this is like one program with not just the benefit for the kids, it's a benefit for the teachers. Because I was a teacher, like, yeah, I showed up with a smile, but man, I was in some dark places.
Yeah.
And if your teacher's in a dark place, that energy is going to be passed on to you.
Yeah.
Obviously. But if your teacher is at a neutral place, as Dave said, or a good place, or whatever label you want to put on it, if they're that ray of sunshine, not the storm cloud, not the dementor, but that, what's it called? The is it Patronus? I'm using a Harry Potter reference.
Yes.
That's the one.
It
That's
is,
the
yeah.
one.
Yeah. Test my whole knowledge there. But if you're the Patronus instead of dementor, then you're going to inspire so many students to be their best selves. And actually, you're going to be a much better educator. So that's really the ethos of what we do at the ECA, helping teachers and that pass through to the kids, which then, and my favorite quote, which I know you guys will love, it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken adults. And that's really what we're doing.
This hugely speaks to me, because my daughter, she's only in primary school, as you say, only just over that 0 to 8 bracket. And we've had a pretty horrendous term where we found out she was being picked on, and her anxiety levels have been through the roof. And we have definitely found that was the ability to help her from internally in the school was quite lacking. So we've actually had to do a lot of things ourselves to help her through that. But as you say, I can massively see the benefit of teachers having that knowledge, having that coaching to be able to pass that on, because really that's exactly what she needed. And that's when when people are at the most vulnerable, when they're chucked into that environment that they have to be in, because, the government says they have to be there. in a group with kids, learning things that they might not necessarily be that interested in, that is the time where they're going to need that support and that, as you say, that ray of sunshine to be able to keep them on the right path. So absolutely fantastic, honestly. Huge advocate, superb.
Oh, thanks, Becky. I appreciate that. Thank you.
My question is probably one that perhaps goes out the scope of our knowledge. I don't know, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Of how effective is that, for example, for kids, the school environment, when say the home environment isn't conducive to that person being vulnerable, for example? Like, do you see much of that, or see any impact as a result of that, where the education support conflicts with the home support, I guess?
Yeah, I'm not in that conflict, but I will share this, Niall. Like, you can have the best teacher, coach, mentor, but it comes down to your mum and dad or your carer. It comes down to those formative years, and it's a generational pass through. And I'm sure you guys have heard the roast beef story, right?
No.
So a mum is making a roast beef, a Sunday roast, and she's in the kitchen, she's prepping it, and she's got this big bacon tray, and she chops the kids in the room. She chops the end off the beef and puts it in the bacon tray. But it could fit in there easily. The little girl asks her mum, like, why'd you chop the end off the beef? Like, it fits perfectly in there. And she's like, oh, I don't know. Your grandma did it. So the next time the little girl's around the grandma's house, she's like, Grandma, my mum asked, like, why do you cut the end off the beef, on a Sunday roast? Because it fitted in the tray. She goes, I don't know, like, my great grandma did it. Well, your great grandma did it. So because they're time at home, she chats to great grandma. She's like, great grandma, my mum cut the end off the roast beef, but it fit perfectly in the tray. What's that about? She goes, oh, it's simple. Back when I was cooking, I never had a tin big enough. So it's that trickle down.
Yeah.
We just pass random beliefs, random stories, random things down from the generations. And that's why you can have the best teacher, coach, or mentor. But some of this stuff is ingrained. I know it's like a silly example. And that's why the parent stuff is super important, and running parent events and helping parents. Because if they haven't helped themselves, or know the best way to support themselves, then they're going to pass that through.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important for schools and parent engagement is hard. Some parents don't want to engage, and that's tough, but that's their choice. And that's why teachers have such an important role to play, because you can be that difference. You can be that change that a child needs in their life. But yeah, mum and dad or the carer or the home life is the most important.
Yeah. I think just kind of touching on that bit around the influence, and the impact that teachers can have, because I don't know, I'd like to think I'm not alone, but there's certainly, if I think back to my school years, there's certainly like a teacher that really stands out that was a big support to me. When maybe others thought that I was just a little shit, or just that, when I was putting my coat on that day, they thought that I was making making a hand gesture at them when I was literally just putting my coat on. But I had one teacher that made a massive impact to me that I'll always kind of remember. And I think, if I think about the current climate, the challenges that schools face in this moment in time, in terms of how stretched they are, I think it's so important to not underestimate the impact that things like this, the work that you're doing, Sam, can have on that teacher, because this is about, yes, supporting them to coach kids, but ultimately the benefit they're getting ensures that they turn up, that little bit better. They turn up in a better place, maybe not every day because life happens, but they're in a better place to deal with it, to cope with it. I suppose, how do you ever face, the kind of challenges from people that just go, how are you going to help me? How is this going to help me? This is an impossible task that I'm facing.
In terms of coaching someone, or
Yeah. So with the environment they're in, that teachers are in, with the way that the education system is at the moment, and how much they've got to juggle, Certainly with the increase in a lot of children with SEND, there's higher and higher percentages. I know my children's school, it's only a small village school, but about 23%, is children with SEND. And just the amount that they're trying to juggle. Do you ever get those doubters that kind of go, how are you going to help me get through any of this? How can I see light at the end of that tunnel?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that, and this is why the piece about the education disruptor comes in, because again, what we do makes a great impact. We've got it recorded, the impact it makes. Teachers really enjoy it. It changes their mental health, changes their relationships with young people. But the challenge is that they're in a system that doesn't foster mental health. Now, let's be totally upfront that teaching does
Yeah.
not support mental health for teachers and kids.
Yeah.
Because you're in a system that is designed primarily from a long time ago in the past for people to conform, to move rooms to the sound of a bell, to pass high stakes standardized testing, and to teach a huge bloated curriculum, and to test kids from the age of 4 on phonics screenings all the way up to when they leave school. So yeah, I mean, in answer to your question, that's where this education disruptor or educational change piece comes in, because nothing can really be changed until there's differences or changes in the system. And yeah, I think some of the teachers, not everyone's a big advocate of mental health or coaching. I understand that. Everyone on our program is a volunteer, so they get it. They want to be there. Because I've done some workshops before with, let's say, some of the old guard from the profession, and there's resistance, especially when I remember my first talks. I was just left. I was 27. And it was this lecture theatre in this, it wasn't the nicest school. There's like, if you imagine the lecture theatre, dim lighting, you got some of the tiles on the roof missing, the chairs are peeling, the leathers peeling off the chair. And I walk in and the energy was just like sucked out. And you got, teachers, arms crossed, head down, looking glum. And I'm there like, hey guys. Oh, I felt, what's the word? It was just an intense environment. But then I was okay, I'm trying to do my thing here, and then you're the ones that are trying to educate and help the next generation. And I'm not saying that like they should be coaches or get into mental health, but you've been in the job for one reason, and people join the profession, I always believe, for the right reasons, right?
Yeah.
Back in the day when they're 21, they're fresh out of uni or whenever they get into the job. But again, the dementor example, the education system just sucks that out of them.
Yeah.
And it sucks out that enjoyment. And then eventually they're in their 50s and they're like, well, what else can I do? And I don't understand that, by the way. That's me being, I'm not that person.
Yeah.
So I'm
So
just the assumption. Sorry, Becky, go for it.
no, I was just going to say, so both of my parents were actually teachers. And I think that's a very accurate representation of my mum, who taught at one school until the school closed. And she practically ran out of those gates over the moon with life because it was over, because that's exactly what happened. It completely sucked the life out of her. It really did. So it's an interesting, that's a good analogy of it, actually. And my dad, he had his own business and then he started teaching much later on, maybe in his late 40s. And he got to a point where he ended up just being a supply teacher, because he said just the expectations, the requirement, Ofsted, all of that stuff, he just said it was too much. He wanted to be able to turn up, teach the kids, have a fantastic day with them, make a difference, and then leave again. And it was the other stuff that massively put him off, which is really telling, I think.
That is such that point you just made there, Becky. Ofsted, the word, or the heading that sends ripple effects through people in schools. And I went through that experience last year. So I'm a governor at a school, and we got notified of the 2-day Ofsted inspection. And part of that, which you kind of know about as a governor, but you don't really think about it, is they want to talk to governors. And I remember like this anxiety that like ran through me Because I'm thinking, oh my word, I've got to go and be interviewed by the Ofsted inspector. And I still am the governor for SCND. And I'm like, oh my word, they could ask me anything. I could massively impact the school's, Ofsted rating. And I think, for me as a governor, that was like a small bit of it. But Sam, as a teacher, the level of pressure that phrase Ofsted, carries is, I mean, it feels to me like it's quite of a frightening thing. I don't know. Is that the reality? Is that how teachers feel?
Yeah, that's how teachers feel. I mean, it got to the point, obviously, recently where Ruth Perry took her own life, due to an Ofsted inspections. That's how far it's got. There's there's the pressure from Ofsted. It's the competition, which what Ofsted produces and promotes. The low pay, which has gone down by 12%. In the last 10 years, and then the workload, which for me is the biggest reason, because no one goes into education for money, and this is while people should be paid alongside inflation and paid the fair way for what they do. If workload was changed, like here's a reason, right? I do work on mental health. When COVID hit, we went from 4 topics at GCSE history to teaching 3. This is what I call a 1%er. So that 1% example will improve mental health, and it's why? Because there's less to teach. So straight away you can explore more topics with students. You've got more time with them. Students haven't got to revise all this stuff. Teachers got more time to mark and lesson plan. You can explore different topics. So even that example of going from 4 topics GC history to 3 will improve mental health by 1% at least. And that's the change. And this is why the work that I do should really be null and void in some ways, because we can make an education system that's flourishing, that like really promotes a love of learning with our teachers and our kids. And we have a choice, like 50,000 leave the profession each year. Currently 4,000 teachers are off work due to stress and anxiety. And this is the challenge that we've got now, where I spoke to an experienced teacher who said that's never changed, by the way. People always leave. There's this churn and burn because people ultimately can't keep up. I was one of the stats of 5 years. A third of people don't last more than 5 years. But the challenge we've got now is there's not enough coming through. So you're retaining around about the same, but recruitment is down.
Yeah, you're not attracting enough new.
So the churn and burn system doesn't work. And I was at this conference last week. There's people saying they're like a post for a head of drama, and it hasn't been filled all year. And they're creative subjects are the first to go. Creative subjects are the most important. Teaches the skills that aren't taught in a classroom. So head of drama, like not filled. Like head of languages, not filled for the whole year. Different examples around the room. And then they show the stats of next year, and it's not getting any better. So it's almost like, when can it end? What's the end point here?
Yeah.
Because the UK teachers are actually the most stressed out of any teacher in OECD countries. So the richest countries, UK teachers are the most stressed. And they've got the highest workload. It's like, just why? Like, surely that wakes you up. There could be something different.
Surely there's some dots to be joined there. It's bizarre, because I think from a governor point of view, I remember going on a training course, I don't know, a year ago maybe, and it was saying, in your full governing body meetings, in your like learning walks and stuff at school, you need to be making sure that you're talking to teaching staff, the head teacher, about workload and how, and making sure that they're okay and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, but what's being done on the back of that? Because me just asking a question, I already know the answer. They're massively overworked. They haven't got enough hours. They haven't got the resource. Finances are just on a horrible slope, go as you project through the next year and the next year. And, you just think that's all well and good, but that's almost like a tick box exercise to say, captured in the full governing body minute notes is that they've asked to see how the head teacher is feeling and, if they're okay with workload. But I suppose touching on the point that you just said there about UK teachers, and with the fact that you've worked with, education systems, in lots of different countries, What is the big difference with ours then? What's the big difference here that, maybe that makes us, our teachers the most stressed or the most, kind of impacted from a mental health point of view?
Again, I've limited experience of that so far,
Yeah.
although I've been in some countries. For me, it's how they view and value their teachers. Which in a country like Finland, which I'm visiting in October, I'm very excited to go see. One of the great education systems. You get 3 people apply for every 1 training teacher position.
Mhm.
In the UK, teacher training positions are down 41%. So it's that value placed in education. And let's be honest, teachers have been dragged through the mud, over the last 5 months. They get slammed in the press. They get slammed, from people that generally don't understand the challenges of the job, where you've got to be, sometimes a police officer, a counsellor,
Social
lecturer,
worker.
a social worker, behavior specialist, a nurse,
A parent in
doctor,
some
a
cases.
parent. I was buying, toiletry supplies for my kids because their parents weren't doing it, and they were getting picked on for being the smelly kid. So, who else was doing that? I had to do that. Again, much small example. So it's how they value their staff. It's how they value their teachers. And for the international schools, I've done some work in, that value is placed higher, especially when you go to private education. I feel that teachers feel more valued.
Definitely.
But yeah, it's how we value and perceive teachers, because I argue they're more important than doctors. It's the
Mm.
profession that teaches all the other professions. And actually,
Yeah.
if we've got a gap in teachers, if we've got cover teachers teaching drama or foreign language, or even physics and computing is the worst one in terms of recruitment, then how are people going to be inspired to do those subjects?
Yeah.
And how are people actually going to, how is kids going to be, wow, like school's amazing, school's so, because they've got someone, bless them, that's not a subject specialist teaching that subject.
Yeah. That
No,
is just. Oh,
yeah.
Becky, sorry.
No, you go.
No. I was going to dwell on that, and that's
I
no,
was
that's
I was just going to say that, the experience I had of the workload my parents had is the one single thing that put me off ever considering teaching as a career. So as Niall will know, I love working with people. I love when you can see that your help and support has really made a difference to people. I think working with kids would be fantastic, but I would never go into teaching because I've seen the other side of it having a parent as a teacher.
And no offense, Becky, or not no offense, but interestingly, their workload is probably way smaller than it would be for a current teacher now.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, you're talking a good
wow.
10, 15 years ago. So yeah, that's the crazy thing.
And this is why we're
I-
losing so many great teachers. Sorry, no, I'll go for it.
No. I was just going to ask, kind of touching on one of your earlier points when you, I guess I'll rephrase it. But when you talk about, it's easier to fix a child than it is, say, a broken adult. Well, on that point, then, now that you've delved into both fields of both helping the teachers and also helping students, with the previous philosophy you have in mind, where have you actually seen more benefit in response from the teachers or the students? Like, who do you come away with going, flipping out, I can see really real value come out of that?
Teachers.
Yeah.
In the way that, again, stereotypically, teachers are more receptive. Obviously, if you're doing a workshop with, let's say, some year 9s, sometimes they haven't got the emotional regulation yet to really reflect. I just did a workshop before this call with 16 teachers in SMEH, and that's, I know, is it SEND school? Anyway, school special, dealt with special needs. But the teachers just have that time to reflect and have the awareness, right? Awareness precedes change. For them to just have the awareness of, oh, this is what I could do differently with my life. This is how I could see things changing. Made such an impact. And that then trickles down, because then they've got the skill and the tool to help the kid. So yeah, I'd suggest that teachers, but I've done some great work with students as well, one-on-one, and coaching them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there'll be profound impacts in either way. But I had a theory, you might say that, and found that interesting to say, well, it's easier to work with a child that's going through something than try and fix an adult. Yeah, in that way, the adult is the one that at glance gets such huge value out of it. I'll say the students don't, but I guess I almost wonder if that is a reflection of the fact that there was a brokenness that they're realizing, or is it actually they're a bit easier to fix than we might even anticipate?
I think if you've never done any inner work, you can scratch the surface a little bit and get a big breakthrough. It's a bit like if you, I used to be like pretty overweight, and when I was losing the weight, the first like month, 2 months was super easy. Just fly off, and I'd make really good progress. And it's the same when teachers join the workshops. You do some really basic surface level stuff. I would say.
Never worked with children or animals.
Can I just get that? Can I go and get that?
Of course.
Yeah, of course, yeah. That's our first animal.
Animal interruption.
That's the word that I was looking for. Yeah.
You know, Niall, I always thought that would come from you as well, with
No,
the
that's
cats.
the lockdown.
He did the barking
But-
before we started.
I like a t-shirt. I like a t-shirt.
Oh my word.
And you know, I was going to say this before, but I'll say it now because we've sort of veered off for a second. We had a few last sheep to shear yesterday, and your Welsh comment came into play as we tried to shove one in a corner. Kind of like, I'm going to have to do a Welshman for a minute, have this crotch to shove it.
How has Sam
word.
only gone off for a dog, and now the sheep shagging has come back in? Even I'm impressed.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's okay. Oh, what were you saying, Niall?
Well, to be fair, I think Sam was on his point, but
I was on a good roll then as well. It was really annoying.
Can you remember where you were at?
No.
Scratching
No.
the surface.
Ah,
seeing the
scratching the
big
surface.
bird
Oh yeah, yeah.
feathers.
So yeah, scratching the surface.
Sorry, Becky.
Yeah, well done, Becky. Yes, I've had teachers in the workshops that I run, and we do like a really basic coaching exercise. And I think it's basic. I've done loads of different counselling, coaching, and therapy. And a lot of the time, the teachers, especially the older teachers, will burst into tears. It's happened a few times. They'll go out the room, they'll come back, and I'll check in with them. What's going on? And they'll always say that I've never had the time to pause and reflect on what's going on for me, or my mental health is on the floor, or I distract myself with my job, or I don't spend enough time with my kids. And it's just this like thunderbolt moment of, this is what can happen. And again, they're going to go back. Yeah, you might not say all of a sudden the world's best teacher, like Miss Honey from Matilda.
Matilda. Yeah.
Matilda.
We all love Miss Honey. Miss Honey. But you're not going to go back maybe Miss Honey, but you're going to go back maybe not Miss Trunchbull.
Yeah.
And that's a good distinction, I think. Actually, I need to use that one more. That's a good one. Yeah, but you're
That
going to be
is
Miss
a good
Honey,
one.
you're going to be Miss Trunchbull.
I totally relate. As Becky knows, I by all accounts an educator in a lot of what I do, and we've spoken in previous episodes my huge mental break at the start of the year. But as you say, it took a little bit for me to uncover all the neuroscience, which is the bit that I was fascinated in. It was huge breakthrough to the point where Becky's even testified. Like when it comes to anxiety, I'm like a different person. But yeah, the impact I feel when I'm teaching people now is huge. And I'm sounds silly. I'm excited to be there now. Yeah, I'm excited to be there, and I'm excited to offer something and know that they can come away with it and get some value out of it. And I think testament to what you're doing, I've always been very stubbornly adamant that in schools, two subjects on top of some of the others that I think absolutely should always be mandatory is first critical thinking, and secondly like an emotional intelligence. And for me, because I went through the same thing, it's very much more like acceptance and commitment therapy, learning not to fight what it was and actually stop putting my negative delusional spin on the feeling. and to go, okay, so I'm feeling anxious, and why is that a bad thing? It's just a thing, right? And as you say, I think what you're doing is commendable, because I've always thought critical thinking should actually be part of it, the ability for people to break down stuff and question things and challenge things, but also just emotional intelligence. I think should, like, I guess what you're doing, I feel like it should just be mandatory.
Yeah.
Not teaching people just about mental health or meditation or necessarily, but teaching them just to actually know what your body does, and that's okay. It's okay if you feel anxious. It's okay, and how you deal with it. But that's always just been mine. So which I think it's brilliant what you do. I just constantly go, why is it not mandatory?
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. I think, like, again, it might be like a box tick. Some schools will do that. They'll talk, usually spot signs of anxiety, or it might be, a bit in PSHE or an assembly. But imagine a subject of that, one that's actually built into the curriculum. See, that's what I mean. There's many options what we can create, but it's a lot to change.
There's got to be a need. There's got to be a want for it from the other side as well.
Yeah,
that's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah,
but at the same
time, unfortunately,
I was just about to say that it absolutely comes down to politics. There's so many things at the moment where you look around, with education, with healthcare. I think about, the journey that we've been on with my daughter. So she was diagnosed as autistic last year. And we had a letter through 6 months ago to say that the genetics blood test that she'd had flagged that there was something that was, kind of highlighted in her genetic makeup. And they forgot to do the referral. And we're now 6 months in, and the waiting list from the date of referral is at least 12 months. And you just go, how is this possible? It already took a year to get her autism diagnosis completed. So you look at, these areas of our society that, play such a huge part in what we do today, but what we're gonna be doing in the future. And we're just breaking it,
Mm.
And I think what's really important is, whilst there's lots of stuff that we can look at and go, wow, that's not great, and we can look at it from a negative angle, there's the really positive stuff that people like yourself are doing, Sam, that are making significant impacts to not just the children, but the teachers as well, so that retention, hopefully, is influenced, I suppose, by the work that you're doing.
Yeah, and that's you hitting it on the head there. And I think it's why it's because the education system is a bit like the Titanic that's sinking. And you've got businesses like mine that are like the lifeboats on the outside, and they're going in to collect survivors, and they're dragging them out of the water. And we're trying to say, everyone's trying to do their own little bit, but the problem is the lifeboats are swimming in different directions.
Yeah.
And what we need to do, which is the challenge, is that we need to be more collaborative in what we do and come together to discuss educational change, to bring about change, and to really make a difference. Because at the moment, I mean, because everyone's got their own, I'm doing this, they're doing that, but we need to come together to force change, because but it's sinking fast, in my opinion, and it's been sinking probably for a number of years, but impact of COVID has really sped that sink up.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Without a doubt.
I wanted to ask something probably a little bit, somewhat deep, I guess. If there's a student listening to this back, and isn't in a good space, and gets the idea of being vulnerable, but actually goes, but I don't feel like I'm in a position or a safe space to do so. So let's say there is someone who feels in that position but feels somewhat helpless on what to do about it. Appreciation, obviously, none of us are psychiatrists or psychologists here, but from your experience, Sam, if there was a message you can almost pass on to them of they feel in that rut but don't know what to do or who to approach, what would you say?
I think the first thing is, obviously to recognize the emotion and check in with what label you give it. So you're feeling anxious or stressed or not yourself. There's a great acronym for this, actually. It's called CALM. So check in with the emotion. What is the emotion? The A stands for airway. I'm doing some box breathing, 4x4x4. So into your nose for counting 4, holding for 4, exhaling for 4, holding for 4, and that clears your thinking. And then the L stands for let go, and just release. And by the way, you're writing this stuff down, like letting go why you're feeling that way. What's happened, what you're really going through at the moment that's causing that emotion to come up. And then once you've done that, move to the M, and the M is about making space and just checking in with, what has gone well today. What are you grateful for? What are you proud of? What are you excited about? This kind of thing. So if you want to be courageous and vulnerable, you don't know how to share, the journal is your best friend. And journaling saved me through so many different things where I couldn't share or open up, and the journal paper is the safe space. And then obviously moving forward, you might want to think about who are my safe people, and it's important to find that support if you can. But yeah, start with the journal and find your calm.
That is that. I mean, journaling. I don't think there's an episode yet where I don't go, oh my word, journaling. I live by it. That has been a huge saving grace for me. Absolutely huge. The one bit that I wanted to touch on there was the bit that I didn't originally do, but I do now, is around the gratitude, because we're so good, or from a journaling point of view, I was great at going, oh my word, these are all the things that I'm feeling, these are all the things that are bad, these are all the, and I'd then get to the end, and I was always a dweller. I would dwell on everything that I'd just written. But actually what I then started to do was go, do you know what, I need to get all that stuff out of my head, but I'm going to end on 2 points. What am I grateful for? What am I thankful for? What have I achieved today? And it could just be, do you know what, I didn't want to face the world, but actually I got in the car and I went to the office. And I'm really pleased that I did, because I had lunch with such and such. And some people would just go, well, that's just going to work. And it's like, yeah, but I didn't even want to get out of bed, So actually just to do that, that's a huge achievement. And it's recognizing those small wins. It doesn't have to be monumental changes all the time.
Yeah, it's a great way of putting it. Small steps lead to big changes. It's not about the 100%. Yeah,
absolutely.
Go for, man.
I was only to say, I don't mean to curtail it, but I have to be really adamant that I want to make the point, because as Dave and Becky know from my previous experience, in that I was absolutely one of those mindfulness and breathing huge skeptic. And for me, actually, the breathing exercise, I know the kind of the science of it now, but actually still was more detrimental to me, because I was doing something that I wasn't used to doing, in a way. So like it made me overthink that bit until I dealt with the overthinking. The breathing didn't help, right, kind of thing. But I'd really have to emphasize, as someone like me who was pure logic and pure science and all the mindfulness and breathing, also, I know it isn't now, but it sounds very spiritual. But even listening to you, Sam, I remember listening to so many people going, oh yeah, it really helped, and I still sat there going, I'm sorry, I do not get it. And it was only until I clicked into really learning the bit for me, which was the science. And I guess the point I want to emphasize, and if you agree as well, is anyone who's listening to this who's in the same boat that I was, who was the biggest skeptic of this stuff, I'd want to say, don't see mindfulness or breathing as the thing that calms you down, or journaling or gratitude as the thing that calms you down. You are doing nothing more than retraining your brain to focus in a different way. Like, it's like I was always told the mindfulness calms you down. No, it doesn't. What the mindfulness did was eventually teach my brain to be able to just focus in the moment in front of me. But I had to really see that for it to suddenly then go, I get it. So I guess I don't want to be adamant and ended on what I'm saying here, but it's such a big thing for me that if anyone's sitting there being a skeptic like huge I was, fine, be a skeptic, I was, but recognize it's not about calming yourself down. These are just things that teach your brain to do something different. So even if you think it's silly, and even if you don't think it's working, just keep doing it, because you're just retraining your brain. And that was the pivotal bit for me. That's what made me realize that it was just retraining something. So yeah, sorry, but that's a passionate spiel, because
the conversations we had on all of that stuff, I'm sure I've still got the bit of paper somewhere that's got a dated and signed of the day that Niall said he actually gets mindfulness now, and I was like, yes, he gets.
I even made a
Absolutely.
diagram of how the brain works with it now.
Oh my word.
That's awesome,
Oh
man.
my word.
Yeah.
So I'm conscious that we could talk forever. However, just as we come towards a close, I think what would be great is what's one bit of advice? And I know you've touched on from a student's point of view if they're in a situation, but from someone that's experienced the life as a teacher, and for someone now that sees it from the outside and supports, kind of teachers through their journey, what's one bit of advice you would give, Sam, to someone that's kind of there struggling to see the light at the end of the tunnel with being in the teaching profession?
The setbacks you're experiencing can be a blessing. And actually, if you engage with what's going on for you, good or bad, it's a secret superpower that can help you become a better teacher, a better educator, or leave the profession if it's not right for you. And the two questions for that are, what can I learn from this? And what can I learn from the experience? The second one is, how can I use this knowledge? And just checking in with those and constantly reflecting on where you are will really help you either uncover what you love about the job, or maybe that it's time to move on and do something else.
Oh, amazing. Sam, one last thing then from you in terms of where do if people want to know more about the great work that you're doing, where can they look? Where do they look you up?
Yes.
Oh no.
Frozen.
We lost you.
What?
Oh,
You
there you go. You're
froze
coming back now.
just as you went into it.
Okay.
There's a heck of a fucking cliffhanger that was.
That was, yeah, it's going because Student Breakthrough. The website is studentbreakthrough.com, or if you're interested in the coach training, it's ecatraining.com. I mainly hang out on LinkedIn, so come and add me on LinkedIn, send us a message, or drop us an email at sam@studentbreakthrough.com. So yeah, more than happy if you found this interesting, come reach out, ask me questions. I love talking about coaching, mental health, and teaching. So yeah, thank you so much, guys, for having me on.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Definitely. Thank you. Oh, he's frozen again.
It's a good timing. Good timing.
No, I'm good. I just want to say, yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Oh no, thank you. Really appreciate it,
Definitely.
Sam. And we'll continue to watch with great pleasure at the work that you're doing. I know, like we've spoken previously about the link within schools and stuff. But for me, and I think the benefit that you can have is absolutely huge. So we will certainly act as virtual cheerleaders for you at every opportunity where we can. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Niall.
I've got something really weird hovering in. Oh, it's gone now. In the corner of your screen, you just had a second ago, Becky. But oh, no, it's back. It's back.
Yeah, it keeps interpreting something is like moving.
Hold on. I haven't got anything behind us, so you're freaking us out slightly now. I'll shuffle forward a bit. Hold on. I can do that actually, can't I? Right.
Is that
There we
problem?
go.
I thought he was gonna say about me and have another slant at the Welsh flag behind me. To be fair,
I've given up saying about it now. To be fair,
so you should.
unreal.
They got that one World Cup and got knocked out in the group stages. It's all right.
Well, I'm a rugby fan anyway, which is
Oh, okay,
frankly
there you go.
not doing anything.
Well, it's not good either way.
If in doubt, Niall, there's always a leak to fall back on.